On October 25th, we're coming back to Melbourne for our first physical MLOps event. Whether you are just starting in the MLOps journey, improving in that space, or whether you have thousands of models in production, this event is for you. The type of things we're going to cover is MLOps for scale, and that scale can be number of models or the number of people in the team, or the number of prediction and inferences that need to be made in an hour or a minute or a second. So how to create effective MLOps for all those scenarios. We're going to cover MLOps processes and team structures. How do we organize ourselves and the talent that we have in our organizations for better results in MLOps? We're going to be looking at creating efficient and effective MLOps pipelines in an end-to-end. What does the data look like, the feature stores, all the way to the model deployment, serving, monitoring, alerting, etc. We're also going to cover getting a C-level buy-in and support for the investment in this area. We're going to be covering what governance and good management looks like in this space. So wherever you are in your journey, the MLOps event in Melbourne on October 25th is going to help you increase the maturity of MLOps in your organization. I hope you can join us. See you then.
I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Talent Insights. Talent Insights are Australia's leading specialist data recruitment business. With offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, they're experts at providing recruitment strategy and building data teams for clients across industries Australia-wide. They provide recruitment solutions for all roles across the data lifecycle, including data engineering, data science, advanced analytics, customer and marketing insights, business intelligence, data product managers, and data governance. They're skilled at finding the best permanent and contract hires for your business needs, as well as statement of work, project focus, data resources. At Talent Insights, relationships matter most. I can say from first-hand experience, Talent Insights are fantastic to work with. Whether you're a business leader within an HR network or a specialist data candidate, Talent Insights should be the first company you turn to for all your data recruitment needs. Find them at talentinsights.com.au.
Hi, and welcome to Data Futurology. I'm Felipe Flores. Thanks so much for being here. Today, we're going to be talking about AI ethics. We're going to be talking about frameworks, how to do it well, what are the ways to get into it, implement it in your organizations. And then I think more importantly, based on the questions that we've had from the audience, we're going to be discussing how do you operationalize AI ethics? What does it look like when the rubber hits the road? So I'm super excited to cover this topic. I have two extremely special guests to help us uncover and share the approaches in this space. So we've got Natalie Rouse. She's the general manager at Eliiza. Nat, how are you going this morning?
Great. Thanks, Felipe. How are you doing?
Great. Very excited. Thank you so much for being on the show. And we got Brendan Nicholls, who is the practice lead for machine learning engineering at Eliiza. Brendan, how are you doing today, mate?
Very good for this Monday morning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. Thanks for making it on a Monday morning, early start, but this is fantastic. So great topic for us to cover. And as I mentioned before, there's been so much interest in the community around how to do this and do this well, and how do we operationalize the AI ethics piece? Because that's as the industry has matured, we've realized that that's where the value is in operationalizing this technology. We want to do it in an ethical way. So this is fantastic. Before we jump in, I might ask you guys to tell us a little bit about your role and your remit, and we can take it from there. Nat, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks. So Eliiza is a specialist data science and machine learning consultancy across New Zealand and Australia. I'm the general manager, and I am responsible for supporting our teams as we grow throughout both Australia and New Zealand, supporting our customers and developing our deep relationships that we have with our clients, and also building out new offerings. And so that includes the development of and embedding of our ethics framework alongside of our more technical activities.
That's great. That's really great. And the growth that the company has had is amazing. So I used to live in Melbourne. I lived in Melbourne for about 12 years up until 2020. And I heard about Eliiza there, and I heard about some of the good work that you guys were doing with customers over there. I didn't realize that it had expanded, across Australia and New Zealand.
But it was interesting because when I moved to Newcastle, where I am now, I met some of the team at NIB, and they were telling me how they work with Eliiza and the good work that you guys have been doing there. So it's great to see the good work that you guys are doing across so many different industries. So excellent. This is going to be a great topic for us to discuss. Brendan, how about from your side? Your role, your remit, I think you're a bit newer at Eliiza, but you come with a wealth of experience, mate. So tell us a bit about that.
No, thank you. Yes, so Brendan Nicholls, as introduced, I'm the head of our machine learning engineering practice. Now, machine learning engineering can be many different things to many different people. And I think it's one of those areas within the industry that's reasonably new, but it is reasonably important. I see it as a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. Data science came first because it was extremely accessible. You could do data science on your laptop. You could perform your machine learning activities easily, do a little bit of experimentation. Machine learning engineering is the part where it takes over from that experimentation. How do you operationalize the models that your data science created? And then how do you put them through into your production systems? How do you give them to business users? How do you enable them within applications within your business as well? So that's essentially my remit within the team. I've got an incredibly talented team of people who work across clients as well as internally building IP about how do we think best practice for MLOps looks. So incredibly talented group of people. We work across all different cloud platforms. We've got AWS, GCP, Azure experience, as well as going into Dataiku and other more niche AI/ML platforms. So that's essentially my remit. I have a strong passion for ethical and explainable AI, and looking forward to having a chat about it today.
Right, that's excellent. That's fantastic. So let's jump in. So maybe we can start with a little bit of background around how the two areas have come to life in terms of one side, as you were mentioning, we've got MLOps. On the other side, we've got AI ethics, and they've been growing as the maturity in our space, in our industry, has been increasing. And we've been able to go, as you were saying, from the experimentation to looking how to get value from the models, or greater value from the models, by operationalizing them and making them accessible to end users, to business users, etc. And then we've also been able to reflect and look back at the models that we've created and be able to see the implications that they're having in society. And I love the fact that, as an industry, we're questioning that about the impact, and we want to make sure that we're creating the society that we want to create instead of perpetuating things that we may not have liked about the past. So maybe let's talk a little bit about those two areas: MLOps, the surgence of MLOps, surgence of AI ethics. Let's jump in. I see, Brendan, you're smiling there. But
No, I think when you think about what ethics is, and I think when you think about what the principles of AI ethics are, one of the core, I think, pillars that AI ethics stands on is governance. So how do you actually govern what ethics in AI is? And when you think about MLOps, it's all about the operationalization of machine learning. So when you think of those two sort of definitions of ethics, machine learning, ops, they sort of go hand in hand together. One's about making sure that the ethical considerations are in place, and one's making sure that there's structure around machine learning. And what you want to do with MLOps, so you're creating those well-defined frameworks, you're creating standards, processes, practices, building in technologies that format the model from experimentation through to production. Ethics can be a layer that you put onto your technological considerations, but it's not something that every practitioner within MLOps is actually considering. And what we want to think at Eliiza, and something that Nat can talk to pretty strongly, is how do you actually consider, when addressing technological problems, that ethical layer? And how do you approach these problems with those considerations at top of mind, not just as a sort of secondary thought or an afterthought, which often happens when you look at how a model's performing and go, oh, this isn't an output I'm expecting, and then trying to reverse engineer the problem. How do you start it from the start? And we see MLOps as a sort of way to achieve that from the get-go. And Nat, did you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Really well said, Brendan, I reckon. At Eliiza, we tend to be pretty passionate people, and and we like to do the right thing. And I think at the bottom, everybody wants to do the right thing. Just sort of having a good way to make sure that you don't accidentally do the wrong thing, I think is what we're really sort of talking about. It doesn't have to be massively overly complicated. It just has to be a start and just thinking about things consciously. When we started thinking about, we've often embedded ethics into our projects, kind of just as a matter of course, when we look at, facial recognition data or any kind of demographic data. It's just good practice to make sure that you've got a good balance of groups across your population, across your input data. But then we started thinking, okay, but how do we make sure that that's kind of embedded and not just kind of, incumbent on one person to think about doing that in this certain case? So we started to look around, and there's a few frameworks out there that are really useful. The Australian AI ethics framework is a really, really useful resource. But even then again, I think it's really useful to think about, how do you take that framework and what do you then do with that? And it does start, from the very beginning, from the very start of problem formulation. If you haven't thought about what the risks might possibly be, you might end up building something that you actually would have designed the problem in a different way if you'd been thinking about it up front. So it's like Brendan said, it's not something that you can kind of reverse engineer and sort of bolt on at the end. Well, it is, and that's better than nothing, but it's certainly a lot easier if you're considering it right from the start.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the proactive nature of this, because it can be sometimes people might feel that it's additional effort and not understanding the value or the implications of doing it versus not doing it. Sometimes the extra effort or the lift might seem like it's almost like too much hassle. So maybe we can jump into that side. The other one, in one of my early views on AI ethics, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, was I was kind of looking at it initially more from a technical perspective and sort of saying, well, if we measure bias, then we try to minimize bias and kind of is that it? Is that most of it? I was like kind of trying to understand about essentially what does good look like. So can we talk a little bit about those points? Maybe Nat, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, and don't be too hard on yourself. I think a lot of us kind of started there and we didn't really know. And it's a hard problem. It's not you. We're technical people and we want to try and reduce everything to something that we can calculate and something that we can measure. And so those things are super useful, but it's not the whole picture. And as technical people, we kind of have to get a little bit comfortable with the ambiguity and the non-measurable side of what needs to be considered as well, which is like we're never going to be perfect, right? But we have to try and by just building a little bit of a framework or having a go, thinking about what questions should we ask ourselves at which point of this journey that might help us to uncover things that we wish we knew earlier, or that could change the way that we think about how we're going to use the data, how we're going to formulate the model, how we're going to use the outputs, how we're going to measure how that model performance is performing over time, relative to not just our accuracy performance metrics, but also ethical performance metrics.
That's really good. Thank you. Brendan, any?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's important to think of like ethical AI from a layer above as well, which is thinking of it as like responsible AI. So what does it mean to be responsible? Ethical is one part of it. So making sure that you're fair and inclusive. So your model's not got inherent biases that exist within it, and the decisions it's making are inclusive. So it's not excluding certain categories of people. But another element of being responsible is also that those models are also explainable. Now, there's layers of explainability, like how it made its decision, which are ethical, but then also from a responsibility perspective as an organization that's making decisions that have large impacts. Now, those impacts could be things that affect people personally, but they could also be things that affect people from a security perspective. So is the model being maliciously used to cause ill effect towards something or someone? Has it been trained in such a way that that malicious effect is now impacting another process down the line? Those are other ways that you need to think about responsible AI without necessarily thinking of aspects of ethical in the way that we traditionally consider them. Another element of being explainable more so than ethical around responsible AI is that it lends credibility to you as an ML practitioner within your organization to business users. So we've all experienced trying to explain the value of what machine learning can be to a chief executive, somebody in our executive team who's going, what's the value? Why are we doing this? It's just popping a value into my report. Couldn't we do that without machine learning? And it's somebody in my team told me, the first rule of machine learning is don't use machine learning. And that's still important to always consider. There's always alternatives to machine learning. It's not the be all and end all. But when you do need to use it, you want to be able to explain and justify how it's making its decision. And if you can clearly represent that to a business user, they're more willing to take the risk and take the opportunity of using machine learning within the organization. And then, of course, once you've got one model becomes 10 models become 100. What's your responsibility as an ML practitioner to look after all of those models? It's easy to talk about ethics and explainability when we're talking about in the context of one thing, but when you've got hundreds and thousands, how do you manage all of those? And that's when ML ops begins to come back into it, and you go, well, you're just one person. How do you actually manage that from an organizational and an operational perspective, that you are maintaining all of these models without necessarily being able to keep on an eye on them yourself?
Yes, that scale is critical, right? And that's where so much of the power comes. But you got to do it in a time leverage way, being able to manage and maintain all those models, and do it in a people leverage way. So ideally, having a reasonable sized team to be able to look after 1,000 models in production or more is in my view kind of the aim.
But before we jump into that, I wanted to ask about about bringing AI ethics or responsible AI frameworks, bringing them down to the creation of the models and some of the challenges there, or the gotchas in that space, or some of the lessons learned that you guys may have around how do people that are building the models, either from a technical perspective or from a stakeholder perspective, how does that change the development of models? What decisions are different? And can we spend a little bit of time on that front? Maybe Nat, do you want to kick us off with that? How to bring the frameworks to development?
Yeah, and I think some of the non-technical sort of side of things is really just asking questions, and it doesn't need to be much more complicated than that. Where did this data come from? Under what conditions was it collected? Therefore, and what other uses are, stipulated by the data collection policy? Are we even allowed to use this data for something different, to a different purpose for what it was initially collected? And that's, that sounds so simple, but I think so many people don't even consider that that data that they have might have really only been collected for a single use, and a lot of applications actually specifically prevent use of it for, second, third order applications.
100%. Sorry to interrupt. Just I in my day job, I work in healthcare, and the 2 points that you just described were two of some of the biggest scandals around internationally. So, for example, DeepMind in the US got all this data from the NHS to be able to predict, people's health and be able to provide them better support. But the issue that they found themselves there was that there was no consent of the person's data to be able to be shared for that purpose. And then there's other issues that we saw in the US, where people were being having their health predicted to see what type of support they needed, but there was problems around using data as a proxy. And in this particular case, it was healthcare spend as a proxy of how healthy somebody was. So essentially, they were offering more support to the people that had spent the most, because that's where they could get the greater savings. But there was, in that case, no data specifically around a person's health. It was all about how much they had spent on healthcare. So as a result, the model was saying that the people that needed high support was essentially people who had lots of money and that had spent a lot on healthcare, a lot of, essentially whites, and then people of lower socioeconomic status were getting less support, or recommended to get less support, because they had historically spent less on healthcare. So it's one side having the right data to make the right decisions. On the other side, how was the data collected and what was the consent are two critical points. Thank you for pointing those. But sorry, I interrupted. So those two key ones. Nat, please continue.
Yeah, and that's such a great point that you raise as well there, just around having a lack of data that is that skews your model as well. So I think another challenge is around on the technical side is around having a way to break your data set down into these kind of smaller population groups for measurement. So if you want to know whether there's bias, if you want to know whether there's gender bias, then you have to have some kind of gender indicator in there. And so either you've got demographic data, which is a proxy at best for, real kind of groupings that you'd want to kind of to measure amongst people, or you don't. And then how do you actually identify what groupings you have and whether you've got, firstly, the right representation across those groups in your input training set, And secondly, that performance in your output, in your model output. How well is that model performing across those different groups? And sort of what's an acceptable tolerance for the spread of performance across different groups? So that's another an interesting challenge, and something that I don't think that you can just say, oh, we've got this demographic data, we'll just use that and that will do. I think doing this properly does add extra effort to your model development process. But I think mostly it's just around curiosity, being curious about what's going on, firstly in the data that you've collected, and then being curious about how your model has learnt, and what it's learnt about different groups of people, and then how it performs on new data for different groups of people. I think are just really important things. And Brendan can talk a bit then about different methods for explainability and things like that. Brendan?
Yeah, explainability, and then operationalizing, and then keeping track of those ethical perspectives once the model is in production and it's getting new data, and how to keep an eye on how what that new data looks like versus the training data, and are we still within the responsible parameters that we wanted to? Sorry, Brendan, not questions this morning.
No, it's all very interesting stuff, and I think, as Nat said, it is an investment to start thinking about implementing ethical considerations into your ML development process. But it's not necessarily an investment that you're going to have to make every single time you do this. So there's ways that you can bring in testing automation for those non-functional requirements into your modeling process. So stuff like bias, you can implementing, testing automation pipelines for testing biases against your model is possible. It's not something you'll have to manually test every single time you do a model. So although it's an initial consideration you'll have to make, this is something that you can make once and then maybe a little bit of tweaking down the line, but you'll get clear answers, and you'll be able to do that across all different types of models you have in the future. One other easy sort of gotcha that people seem to always make is that ethical metadata, that stuff like, how risky is it to be building a model on this sort of data? How socially acceptable is it? How sensitive are people to being predicted based on that stuff? We talk about it theoretically, can actually be stored as metadata. You don't need to look at it from a theoretical perspective every time you're talking about it. Just store it. And then every single time a data scientist is using the data, they can look at it and go, oh, I've got some social reaction metadata on, using biases around gender to determine, aspects of this model. I probably shouldn't do that. And it gets people considering it from the development perspective. So you're sort of tackling it right at the start. And then when we think about through the whole process, things like development tracking, so, looking at data lineage, where's the data originating from within your organization? When did it start? Has the data changed? How has it been transformed? Are those transformations also ethical transformations? Those things can be fed through into an MLOps system as well, built into features. And then once it's actually, your data lineage, you can then consider model tracking. So what's the origin of the model? When was it created? How's it performing over time? What sort of models are contributing to it? What sort of features are contributing to it? And then the output. All of those things can be implemented into an MLOps system as well. And I think it's important to consider not only just the ML stuff when you're considering an MLOps system, but also the data and the outputs and looking at where they start and where they end and who they're going to.
Oh, mate. Yeah. Music to my ears. That's spot on. I remember I was trying to get some at work. I was trying to get some investment for this area for MLOps, and I got some of the questions were like, why do we need to do all this stuff? Like, doesn't the model just do it? And my response was like, if you had people, say frontline employees, making decisions for hundreds or thousands of customers in a month or in a year, wouldn't you want them to get regular training or be updated on the policies or to understand how our customer base is changing, the type of decisions that we want to make as an organization? They should get kind of regular training and updates and reminders about that stuff. I was like, 100%. MLOps, we're doing that. We're doing that for machine learning. We're tracking it. We can manage by exception. We can get more scale. Manage by exception when there's issues. We can get scale. So it's almost like a weight off your shoulders in terms of the implications. So you get
it's so true. And I think a lot of people in the current IT space consider machine learning to be like standard software development and DevOps practices. You create an application, and as long as that application and everything connecting to it works, it will work. But that's not the case. The basic assumption of artificial intelligence is that it's never truly complete. So I see it as we've currently got CI, CD. I see that as an extra part, CT, so continuous training. Or you could call it continuous development as well if you wanted to, but it needs to constantly be updated. AI, just like a human, if you're not updating it, if you're not retraining it, it's going to degrade. It's not going to be as good as it was a year ago. I know I haven't touched the tools for a couple of years. My skills go away. It's just the same as a model. Data changes, and you look at the world, data's changing so quickly. If we were talking about social media 2 years ago, there'd be no data on TikTok. And yet, look at it now. So it's just so important. The point you made, you have to constantly be looking at artificial intelligence. It constantly needs to be changing.
Oh, mate. And the point that you made was definitely something that I found as a key or as a gate opener for discussions with software engineers working or coming into the space, working with, for example, with my teams, that from a software engineering perspective is saying, if I lock down the code and I track the code and I know that the code works, then everything's going to be fine. And it's like, well, no, the inputs, the data can drastically change. And as a result, get drastically different results and in those discussions, we came up with an example to say, because we're in healthcare, so we're saying, if we build a predictive model to predict, say, people's health, and we're only showing it people between 20 years old and 40 years old, and it learns about that, then we put it into production, and it's suddenly getting information about people that are 60 years old and above, the model's not going to say, hey, hang on, I haven't seen people like this before. I don't really know what I'm doing. It's just going to try and take a guess, and it's all going to, work, as in like the inferences are going to be done, but how good are they? That's the part that you need to sort of layer on top. And does the incoming data in production line up with the data and training? Nat, a few notes there. Any thoughts?
Yes, a couple of really amazing, really great examples there, and kind of metaphors. But I think that comes back to the responsibility aspect, right? Like, we have a responsibility by creating this to make sure that it's performing the best that it can over time, not just once. And for an organization to have a model in production, they have a responsibility to make sure that that's performing well, and that they're understanding how that's performing and how that performance is changing over time. I just think we don't really sort of talk about that much these days, but I do think that it is irresponsible to have a model running in production without that level of oversight over it.
Yeah, so true, so true. Just like you wouldn't have a human, making customer decisions without training or alignment to policies. Yeah, totally agree. And so for the people listening and watching and wanting to get into the space, both from a responsible AI perspective, from an MLOps perspective, where can they start? Where's a good place that you guys recommend where they could start their journey or further their journey?
So Eliiza's began to sponsor and host a meetup around the community called MLOps.community. Now, this is a global community organization that we've been watching for a little while, and they've got some incredible resources around ethical AI, responsible AI. So if you do go to their website, mlops.community, you'll see some of those incredible talks that they've got some experts in the field discussing how MLOps systems can be in place around responsible AI, ethical AI, frameworks, etc. Also, if you're in Melbourne, we are going to begin hosting a meetup every second, I should have thought of this, Wednesday of the month. So please, if you are around, we'd love to have you check out the mlops.community website, and you can find the details for the meetup, and make sure I actually gave the right day, but we will be there. And there's plenty more resources from Nat as well.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. I'm definitely going to try and make it to Melbourne for one of those meetups. It sounds really great. And really nice to see the community kind of coming back to in person again. Also, Brendan and I are always open for a chat. If anybody wants to hit us up on LinkedIn or anything, or hit us up on the Eliiza website, we're always keen to have a chat with like-minded people and share our experiences. Also, we will, Eliiza, our CEO, James from Eliiza, previously hosted a podcast called AI Australia, and we are actually going to be relaunching that very soon, but with a particular focus around responsible AI as well.
Great. Oh, that's excellent. Thank you. Guys, the work that you do is excellent. Thank you so much for, the additional work that you do to give back to the community. On the meetup side, for MLOps, offering your time and for people to be able to connect and pick your brains is fantastic. Bringing more conversations around ethical and responsible AI through the podcast, I think that's fantastic. And I do know that you guys are also got something else in the works where you're going to be hosting a hackathon soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so IntelliHQ is a not-for-profit organisation supporting innovation in healthcare, and we are going to be hosting a hackathon for them for healthcare professionals to drive understanding of what can be done with healthcare data sets. Obviously, healthcare data sets that have been, specifically obtained with the consent to be used for innovation. But so we're going to be hosting, I think, in 2 or 3 of our locations across Australia, hosting this hackathon, and also providing subject matter expertise from the perspective of both model development and also ethics facilitation.
Phenomenal. And where can people find more information about the hackathon?
That's on the intellihq.com.au website.
Great. And we'll add the links to everything that you've mentioned. We'll add them to the show notes. And we'll include maybe the links to your LinkedIn as well for people to reach out. And Nat, Brendan, thank you so much. That was, so much fun, like so interesting, the work that you guys are doing. Thank you for everything that, as I mentioned before, everything that you're sharing with the community, which is obviously above and beyond the great work that you're doing. And thank you for the work, and thanks for spending some time with us, helping us understand and better prepare ourselves for operationalizing responsible AI.
No, thank you very much for having us. Looking forward to talking more about the Scaling AI with MLOps conference.
That's right. So in Melbourne, coming up on the 25th of October, we're having the MLOps conference. So looking forward to seeing everyone there. It's going to be a great day. We obviously have people from Eliiza coming. The ticket sales have been going well. So please, for the people listening, grab your tickets, come discuss MLOps. It's going to be a great day in Melbourne. Hope to see you all there. Brendan, Nat, thank you again. That was excellent.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope that you got a lot out of this discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel so more people can find out about the challenges that leaders have in the analytics and AI space. And that's what we're trying to share in Data Futurology. So please like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Thank you so much.